Well, sorry for missing yesterday, but it's a weekend, had things to do. Uh, Today I will get caught up though. We have big things going on in Europe regarding the war with Russia and the prospects for nuclear Armageddon. The first thing that happened yesterday that I didn't get to talk about was that Sweden has refused to join the joint European Union investigation into the Nord Stream bombings, or I guess we should call them Nord Stream explosions. They haven't officially determined that they're bombings yet, but everyone pretty much believes that, including the Swedes, which they've said in the past. However, what they've said is that they have classified information in their possession regarding the explosions that they cannot share with the European Union because it would risk national security. Now, the obvious implication here is that if Sweden had evidence that the Ruskies blew up their own pipeline, the Swedes would not be withholding that information and saying, oh, you know what, we can't share this with you because, it would risk our national security. We can't go ratting on Putin because we're afraid that he would retaliate against us for exposing his attack on his own pipeline. No, if their information pointed in Russia's direction, it would be on the front page of every newspaper in the Western world. So therefore, the logical conclusion to be drawn here is that they have information that will lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. No, maybe not literally. I don't think they're in quite that situation in Sweden, but they probably have information that will lead to the blame being shifted completely and unabashedly towards the United States, because they really seem to be the most likely culprits here. The U.S. bipartisan establishment has, and actually even Trump, have been obsessed with the Nord Stream pipelines for years. And long before this war ever started, the only people in the world who wanted to get rid of the Nord Stream pipelines were in Washington, D.C., and still the people who had the most desire, the most motive, and the most means to do away with these Nord Stream pipelines live in Washington, D.C. Now, that alone, I think, would be enough for Sweden to classify this information and to not provide it and say, well, it would risk our national security, because if they expose the United States, they might be afraid of retaliation there, and so therefore that would be a national security risk. But it also might be that Sweden had a hand in it, that the United States perhaps had some of its local buddies help them blow up these pipelines. Now, do I think that the United States needed help from like Poland or Sweden or something like that? No, not really. But maybe they needed to let them know ahead of time that they were going to do this, so that the Poles and the Swedes knew what was going on, and that they didn't blow the whistle that, like, hey, look, somebody's about to blow up the Nord Stream pipelines, let's go stop that. They had to kind of know ahead of time, hey, turn the other way while we go in here and sabotage these pipelines feeding gas to Europe. And as we know now, even Germany was given a heads up about this quite a few months ago. So it's an open secret, so to speak. Nobody talks about it, but everyone was directly informed that the U.S. would be taking out the Nord Stream pipelines, which, needless to say, is a provocative act of war that needlessly brings us closer to nuclear Armageddon, as Joe Biden himself admits. Now, speaking of nuclear Armageddon, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, the man-child, former Rothschild banker, who is married to a geriatric school teacher, I believe. I hate having to say this, but he really is the only adult in the room when it comes to Western diplomacy. He is the only person who seems to have any common sense and understands that nuclear war is a bad thing that we want to avoid. When asked point blank, so to speak, by a subversive journalist who would like to bring about the end of human civilization, about the prospect for Russia dropping some kind of tactical nuke on Ukraine, they asked him, well, Mr. Macron, I mean, wouldn't you respond, and launch a full-out, nuclear strike on Moscow? And Macron, thankfully, said, of course not. That's ridiculous. What happens to Ukraine doesn't affect France. It's not a threat to France. And so, of course, we would not nuke Russia if they nuked Ukraine. And the entirety of the Western world, for some reason, is aghast at this. All of these journos and these pseudo-intellectuals in all of these Western capitals, the politicians, the lobbyists, whatnot, the arms dealers, they want to bring about the end of the human race, not even human civilization. The human race would cease to exist. That is what they want. They say, well, if Russia nukes Ukraine, of course we have to end the world. Mutually assured destruction worked because there used to be men in charge of the nuclear weapons who never wanted to use them under any circumstances, even if the other guy used them first. And they did these war games back in the 80s with Reagan and Gorbachev, and both of them, went through the drills where, okay, hey, and Gorbachev is put in the bunker, and they say, okay, Reagan just launched the nukes, and this is a game. Gorbachev knows this isn't real. But, they do the war game and say, okay, well, Reagan just launched nukes at Moscow. What do you do? And Gorbachev didn't do anything. He said, you know what? Even if they blow us up, I can't bring about the end of the world. I don't want to have that on my conscience. I'll just die. That's fine. Because we're going to die either way. What's the point in killing both of us? And put in through the same drill, Reagan told, okay, Gorbachev, he shot first. All of the major cities in the United States will cease to exist. What's your response? And Reagan also said, you know what? No, I can't do it. That's why mutually assured destruction worked. Because the men at the top didn't ever want to use them. Now we have at least one side, we know, in the West, who is eager to push that button, who wants to turn the entirety of Russia, that massive landmass, into a sheet of glass. Except, apparently, for Macron, who understands that Russia has more nukes than he does. And I believe Russia, now who knows, the U.S. probably unofficially has tons of nukes that we don't know about, but officially, Russia has the most nuclear weapons in the world. So Macron knows if he presses that button, sure, he might do some damage to Russia, but his life will end, the lives of all of his voters will end, the lives of all of his trading partners, in international commerce will end. The lives of everyone he's ever known will end. And even if they're still alive after the smoke clears, they won't want to be alive. It will be a world that no one will want to live in. But no, for the rest of the Western world, Ukraine is the hill they will die on. Literally die on. Ukraine, a former Soviet republic. Until 1991, Ukraine was unquestionably not only a part of the communist bloc, it was a part of the Soviet Union itself. And so to preserve their grift in Ukraine, their little money laundering center, they are willing to end the world. That's what these people want. They really think that if Russia nukes Ukraine, well then we're just going to blow up the whole world. I can't get past that. The fact that there is anyone who would disagree with Macron's stance here, let alone the fact that he's clearly on his own. I mean, it's not even close. There's nobody stepping up to defend what Macron said. That, to me, makes it clear that we are in people always say, oh, well, this is the worst time, the most dangerous time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. No, this is the worst time ever. This is much worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Actually, you know what? I should stop myself. That's presentism, I think, taking over. I don't want to say that. There were probably people in America back during the Cuban Missile Crisis who were saying, let's just launch the missiles at the Soviet Union now. Those people probably did exist. I don't think that Kennedy was out there saying that. I don't think that Kennedy was out directly saying, we are on the edge of Armageddon, and any day now, the world could end. I don't think he actually said that. I think that everyone thought that. But I don't think that Kennedy himself was stating that, and I don't think that the media was so eager for nuclear war to break out. So I'll say this is a different situation from the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the other thing is that, it was very clear what Khrushchev wanted. It was calculated, putting those missiles in Cuba. The point was to show Kennedy, hey, this is how I feel when you put missiles in Turkey. So just take them out of Turkey. And so Kennedy said, you know what? That makes sense. We're going to do that. And then the crisis was over. There is no real end to this crisis if it were to break out. Now, we're not there yet. That's the one caveat. Putin has not nuked Ukraine, and I don't think that he will. I don't see why Putin would want to detonate a nuclear weapon that close to his borders. I don't see how. I don't see the purpose of it. What is it that a nuke could achieve that conventional weapons wouldn't, especially when you take into account collateral damage? I'm not a military guy, but that's just my thought. If you are fighting a war with a country right next door to you, even if you have battlefield nukes that are not going to, blow up half of a continent, even if it's not like an H-bomb, I still don't see how it benefits you to use those weapons right next to you. Like if it was Afghanistan and it was the U.S., I could understand the U.S. using tactical nukes in Afghanistan. So hopefully we won't have to find out what the West will do if Russia nukes Ukraine. I mean, really, what Russia has needed from the beginning, it would appear, and again, I'm not a military expert, but from everything that I've read and seen and heard, it seems like Russia was just really light on manpower. They went in with a very lean force of soldiers, and they just don't have enough to be everywhere at once. Considering the number of soldiers that Russia sent into Ukraine, it seems that they punch above their weight, and so if they have enough men, they should be able to mop the floor no problem. So I don't know why we're even having this conversation. Why are we ramping up all the talk about the nukes? Because the nuke talk has always started coming from the West. The West has been talking about nukes the whole time. Now, what are we going to do when Putin nukes Ukraine? Well, we have to nuke Putin back. Well, so for months now, the West has spent talking about how they want to nuke Russia. Do you think that has de-escalated the conflict, or do you think that has escalated the conflict? Anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.